A lot of attempts to learn a new skill or a new kind of endeavor usually start with an initial progress boom, where things start off easy and stuff gets accomplished really quickly. It was the same for this project really. At the beginning it was simple stuff like making connections with each of the components and testing each component individually. I could search it all up on YouTube and find great tutorials. Plus, seeing the actual components work on their own was really motivating. For example, seeing the OLED display light up for the first time was really great on my morale. Of course, there were still tiny setbacks, like the OLED display didn't light up the first time I tried it, but the reasons for these setbacks were really minor and really easy to fix. For example, for the OLED display, I just didn't have the pins connected right, and simply checking my wiring allowed me to fix that problem. This initial progress was going great, and I just kept riding that wave until I got the OLED to display the altitude and the bank angle. After getting this first working version, I tried adding the GPS into it in order to measure the ground speed. And this is where things started going wrong. Simply just adding the GPS to the code crashed everything. I'm still not exactly sure what the problem was, but here's my best guess based on the frantic Googling that I did. Basically, when writing code, you often use libraries, which is pretty much code other talented people have put out, which allows you to do what you want to do without stressing about doing absolutely all the tiny details yourself. You can literally think about it like a library, where if you tell a program to do something, let's say get data from the barometer, but you yourself haven't defined exactly how to do that, the program can use a book from the library and get the job done itself. The thing is that not all libraries are the same. They each take up different amounts of memory, have their own ways of doing things, and are overall unique. For my first version of the Andromeda HUD, which is what I'm calling this project, I was using the Adafruit GFX library to display to the OLED and using a software serial library to talk to the GPS. On their own, they worked fine, but together they just didn't. The reason might be because the code gets really RAM hungry, and the GFX library needs quite a bit of free RAM to work properly. My first theory to solve this was to get rid of the barometer entirely and just use a GPS to measure altitude as well as ground speed. Then I realized the GPS altitude is notoriously unreliable, and instead of getting an accuracy of plus or minus 1 meter, I was getting plus or minus 10 meters. After that whole mess, I decided to switch over to another graphics library entirely. I moved to U8glib, which is simpler to work with. Also, I went from using software serial to alt software serial in order to talk to the GPS more efficiently. And that seemed to do it. The airspeed showed up, the altitude showed up, the bank angle showed up. Spurred on by this progress, I did a bit more coding, and the next thing you know, the G-force shows up as well. By the way, if you're wondering why it's backwards, that's because the display needs to be reversed so that when it gets reflected by the screen, it'll look correct in the camera. So this is where I am now. I'm glad I was able to solve the problem using Google and the many people that have been in this position before. If you want to see my code as I update it, there's a link in the description to my GitHub. And also, I could not have done this without the many people that have worked to make the libraries that I've used. So all the references that I've used are on GitHub. So yeah, let's see what happens now.